friends, and welcome to the Weirdly Random. My name is Steve, and I'm joined by none other, the best-selling author and my co-host in life. That's right, not my normal co-host, but my wife, Sarah. So, what's up, Weifei? Hi.
Just finished my latest book last night.
Oh,
so I'm very excited.
Yay. Well, the rest of us were sleeping in the world of Dreamy Dreamland. You were in Righty Righty Land.
Yes, that's what usually happens. I do my best work at night.
Yes. So, before we get into today's episode, I have a little bit of, a very tiny bit of listener feedback. And so what's important about listener feedback is, one, it's important for us to know that listeners are actually listening because they provide feedback. And we do listener feedback on the show to let the listeners know that we listen to them.
Always a good plan.
So it's a listener feedback for listeners. So, but it's always good to do. And so this actually is a comment here from our first episode. And that was the episode that Riley and I did about our top 7 random best ideas. We sort of just picked out 7 things and kind of said these are our top 7. But we had a comment on our YouTube video here from Robert Ducky. And Robert Ducky said, "Hey, I have an episode idea. Maybe you can do an episode on weird food combinations. It would be cool to do a top 7 on abnormal food combos."
That's easy. Anything with ketchup. Completely disgusting.
Yeah. So for our listeners, they don't know this, but there was a period of time early in our marriage you wouldn't even get the ketchup out of the fridge.
It's gross.
It's gross. No, ketchup is wonderful. We use ketchup on everything if we can. Except, though, I will say I'm not a fan of ketchup on my eggs. I can't do that.
Yeah, that's one of the really gross ones for me.
Yeah, but I can do ketchup on a lot of things. In fact, as a kid, there was this hamburger helper meal that my mom used to make, and beef and noodles that I was not a fan of. But the only way I would eat it is with loads and loads of ketchup.
I think aside from ketchup, the weirdest food combination I ever did was putting grape jelly on my hamburger. I was like maybe 10. And I know. I don't know why I did it.
So
it was gross, and I had to eat it anyway.
Oh. Well, I mean, I know I have some weird food things like chicken and noodles I don't do, and I try not to do noodles and cheese. You know, like mac and cheese is not my thing. But anyway, we should save that for the episode because there's been some weird stuff that I've done, and there's certainly been some weird stuff that I've heard of other people doing. But so thanks, Robert Ducky. We'll put that in the notes here for a future idea, and that one might require actually some video. We might need to do some extra things for that episode because we might not just need a video to record our reactions to some of that, but we might need a barf bucket or something. That might not go over so well. But so yeah, well, good. Thanks, Robert Ducky. We'll like I said, we'll add that into the mix here for a future episode. Okay, so this evening we are going to be taking a look and really leaning into nerdiness, particularly mine, and we're going to discuss probably it is the longest running television show in history.
It's one of
sci-fi.
It's the longest sci-fi.
Okay,
yes.
Well, so a point of clarification there. But it's really about the one and only, except for about 12 regenerations, the Doctor Who show. And Doctor Who, there's this tension here, this opportunity where we could do like the whole Doctor What? No, Doctor Who. How? No, it's Doctor Who. Kind of like that whole Laurel and Hardy gag, of who's on first. Well, the Doctor's on first. Or my personal favorite knock knock joke. Knock knock.
Who's there?
Doctor.
Doctor Who.
Oh, there it is. There it is. It's probably, it is my favorite. That nobody understands.
Unless they're a Doctor Who fan.
Yeah, which is few and far between fans. There's not too many that I encounter.
And it's always amazing when you do meet somebody. You talk about it for hours afterwards.
It's like a kindred spirit, you know. It's
Exactly.
like, oh, you know, I had that happen in the grocery store once. I was wearing actually this sweatshirt that I have on right now, my Doctor Who zipper hoodie that is a TARDIS, has a bit of printed stuff. I'm like a walking TARDIS, and I was in the produce section of the grocery store, and a guy indicated, hey, I see your sweatshirt, really nice. I'm like, oh, you're a fan. He's like, yeah. It was like, oh, kindred spirit.
And how long were you standing there talking to him about it?
Actually, it wasn't very long because it was kind of like we understood each other. You're on the clock and I've got produce.
Same wavelength.
Yeah, I was like, I'll see you later in the time vortex, you know. So, but anyway, all right, again, I'm getting distracted here, but today we're going to cover Doctor Who, and I'd really like for us to kind of discuss not just the significance of Doctor Who, both in British and American culture, which we can talk about, but some thoughts about the show, and there's something about Doctor Who that I would gladly give my right arm for, and so we'll talk about that later on. I'm left-handed, so I can do without my right arm, but So why don't we get into it? And as the 10th Doctor will say, allons-y. And so I think first off, we might need to provide some background information. You know,
go for it. Not
everybody is a Doctor Who fan. Not everybody understands Doctor Who or understands the context. And so if one of you, our listeners, if you're not into Doctor Who,
you really should be.
You really should be. Yeah. We won't shun you. There's no judgment here. But it's really something maybe you should look into, particularly if sci-fi is your thing. And you know, I notice a theme for people who are interested in Doctor Who. They tend to also be fans of Back to the Future, time travel. They tend to, like other things from the 80s, tend to be a little quirky, and
tend to be geeky, nerdy, in that realm of.
Yeah, and that's okay. We're not all socially awkward like some people are, but we're good. We like it.
I admit that I'm completely socially awkward.
Oh,
I'm okay with admitting it.
Okay. Well, so somehow something worked because that's how we got married, through our social awkwardness. Okay, so a little bit about Doctor Who. So it first aired now almost 60 years ago, November 23rd, 1963. Now, I throw that date out there, but does anything about that date sort of ring familiar? November 1963.
I don't know. The only thing I can think of in the 60s is something related to space and JFK.
Something related to space. Could be when we landed on the moon for the first time.
I don't do dates. I love history, but I don't do dates.
That's hilarious.
I like the stories.
Yeah. So, yeah, but I don't think that was until like 68 or something, but somewhere in there. No, it couldn't have been 68 because...
Wasn't JFK the one that said that famous speech?
Our listeners, this is how we get listener feedback. We totally botch history and somebody's going to comment here. Yeah, JFK was the one that had mentioned something, but I don't think JFK was, again, man, I should have checked my history here. Okay. But JFK mentioned that we should do it, but he wasn't president when it happened because that was in 68. Anyway.
Okay. What's your factoid?
What I was going to say, yeah, exactly, was on November 22nd, 1963, that was the day that JFK was assassinated.
Oh.
And so Doctor Who aired one day, just the day after JFK was assassinated. And so which is really sort of interesting that in the midst of all of that, that the BBC actually still aired the show, as this premiere. Maybe they don't care about American, politics, American history, but, sometimes there's...
Well, I'm sure if it had something to do with, America or President Kennedy or anything like that, they probably would have delayed it, but it wasn't.
Yeah, or they, sometimes, other governments are sensitive to certain things, that are happening in the history of a particular country, so they will not air something. That recently just happened with Nintendo, and they were releasing a trailer for the sequel to Breath of the Wild, now known as Tears of the Kingdom, and the Nintendo UK said, we're not going to air the special or the trailer, the Nintendo Direct, because the title of the Zelda game, the next Zelda game, is Tears of the Kingdom. And here the Queen had just died. So trying to be sensitive to all that. BBC wasn't sensitive 60 years ago when JFK died, but that's okay. To each his own, I suppose, but...
Maybe they figured Americans didn't watch British television.
Well, and that's probably true. This was before the days of cable TV, so it was just over-the-air broadcasting anyway, I guess. So there was no internet, But anyway, so there's about Doctor Who. So 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago, Doctor Who aired, and there's actually a TV movie about it, about how the Doctor Who series came to be, and it chronicles the whole beginnings of that. We've watched that, Adventures in Time and Space.
So we have it?
We do have it. We'll have to watch it again. But what's so neat is it follows the career a little bit of the guy who played the first Doctor. And darn, I am forgetting his name. William Bradley. No. No, he's the guy that played the guy who played the first Doctor. I'll look it up. We'll put it in the show notes. But what's interesting, too, about Doctor Who is that it is listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as the longest-running science fiction television show in the world and the most successful science fiction series of all time, based on overall ratings and DVDs and book sales and iTunes traffic and all that kind of stuff. So
considering it's still going strong now.
Yeah, they've taken some breaks here and there, but it's still going, still airing, still having new episodes, which is kind of neat. So that's a little bit about the show. But the Doctor, like the whole joke of, I think the whole show is Doctor Who. Who is this person? Who is this guy that goes around in a blue box and all that? And so, I found this article. It talks a little bit about the Doctor. It says it follows the adventures of a title character, a rogue Time Lord, which is interesting, of somewhat unknown origins who goes by the name The Doctor. Now...
Rogue sounds a little strange, but it is accurate.
Yeah. For our readers who don't know what Time Lords are, we'll get there. Wikipedia is a great thing. But so the Doctor, he kind of goes on this thing, and we always talk about, or they always sort of allude to the fact that he comes from this planet Gallifrey, the planet of the Time Lords. He's escaping, and so he borrows, in air quotes, a TARDIS, which is an acronym, and it's this device. It's this spaceship of the Time Lords, right, that travels in time and space. And they always say what? It's the TARDIS is what? The catchphrase.
Oh, my mind's blanking.
Bigger.
Oh, bigger on the inside, yes.
It's bigger on the inside, yeah. Because in Time Lord science and math, like because they work with time and the dimensions, they can fold space in on itself. So you have something that looks like this blue phone box, and I have some out here on our table for...
well, that's what it looks like now. It didn't always look like that.
Right. In the original series, it looked like just a gray cylinder.
It could have looked like anything because they called it the chameleon circuit.
Right.
So it's originally just a gray cylinder, but because of the chameleon circuit, it could look like anything. And in the original series, it did look like anything. It changed a lot.
Yeah, at one point in the early series, around the fifth Doctor or so, fifth or sixth Doctor, it got stuck. And it wasn't a police box. It was an armoire or something. And it was ornate and very strange looking. So they did that for a little while. I don't think it lasted very long, but, it's kind of neat. So anyway, TARDIS stands for time and relative dimension in space. And so what's fascinating about this is that it just has this vast interior, and it is smaller on the outside than it is on the inside, but it's just so cool. I mean, that has become the icon of Doctor Who. There's right. I mean, in British television, even American television, in cartoons, whatever, you see a blue phone box. Nobody's thinking about police officers in Britain in the 60s. They're thinking Doctor Who.
Weren't most of the phone boxes red or
no? So that's the confusing part, is that these were usually blue, but some of them were different shades of blue. Some of them were black. The phone booths were red.
Okay, not the police boxes.
Not the police boxes. The phone booths were red, but the police boxes were all mostly blue. Some of them were black. There's a few strange off colors out there, but yeah, for the most part, they're all blue, which is kind of interesting. It's kind of like there's that scene in Harry Potter where they're going to the Ministry of Magic, and there's like the red phone booth. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is like, Mr. Weasley and I guess Harry, they're going in because he's been called in, and they follow down the phone booth. Like it's like an elevator, and it drops down, and all of a sudden you're in like the Ministry of Magic. It's kind of like bigger on the inside, but it's a phone box, not a
in that
police
case,
box.
it's more like Get Smart, where there's an elevator that takes you.
Yeah.
There's a phone booth elevator that takes you down into the secret
lair or whatever,
hideout, secret location.
Yeah. It's interesting. You could track the uses of Doctor Who, or the references all throughout. We'll talk about that later. So here's something I think we've talked about this a little bit, is the marketing and the filmmaking brilliance of Doctor Who. Not just storyline, but like, when you and I, we've watched a movie and we're like, hey, that's not the same actor that played so-and-so. Like, what happened? And so it's always awkward when they swap out an actor.
Like a random TV show.
Random TV show, or even, actually, this happened in movie sequels. This actually happened in Back to the Future, because Crispin Glover, right? Crispin Glover? Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was George McFly in the first movie, but he was not in the others. There was another guy that they substituted in. Yeah, pretty sure. In fact, I was just watching. The guy's birthday is actually today. They were recording. The guy who played the other George McFly, his birthday's today. Don't know his name. I just remember Crispin Glover, which is so strange because it's what happens when you swap out an actor. It's like, it's strange.
You remember the first guy, the second guy not so much.
Yeah. I mean, Harry Potter did the same thing, right? So Dumbledore, they swapped him out, though that was because the other guy died.
Sad.
Crispin Glover did not die. But, they swap out the actor. So what do? Do you keep the character the same, or do you reinvent the character? And with Doctor Who, they actually have an opportunity there where they essentially reinvent.
They built it into the lore of the show. Yeah,
so they're not just, oh crap, what do we do? Our guy left, but how do we maintain the storyline with a new actor? And recognizing, right, that it's awkward. This is a different guy. So what happens, right? He gets to a certain point and
Well, what happens is something happens which basically causes the doctor to have a mortal injury. Like he basically dies. But instead of actually dying, he's regenerated as a new person.
Yeah, so the medical piece of that is that the Time Lord energy that is stored within the Time Lord, the Doctor, right? His cells enter this regeneration thing, and so...
But it's not triggered until he gets a mortal injury.
Yes.
Like, it has to be bad, because he's had injuries, and they weren't that bad enough to trigger a regeneration cycle.
True, but there have been a couple of episodes where he has engaged with that Time Lord energy, but not to the point of regeneration, but to heal someone or to do something else. But it's only once or twice in some of the newer series we've seen that. So the first Doctor, right? So he decides he's done with the series. He has this mortal injury. We write that into the storyline. All of a sudden, some camera effects, right? And ta-da, we've got a new Doctor with new face, new personality. And now you've got a marketing and a film writing mechanic where you could do this forever.
And they have.
And they have for 60 years. But what's so interesting, too, though, is that it's not just where they swap out an actor, right? But they start off, like that new Doctor doesn't always have the same memories. Sometimes it's the same memories, but generally it's the same Doctor, it's the same person, just new face and all that. But there's like a period of time where the new Doctor is disoriented or
transitioning
or getting used to things and maybe a little bit clueless. For anybody who's watched the more recent series, Matt Smith, when he became the Doctor, he's trying to figure out who he is and what he likes and what he doesn't like. And so there was, the first episode was all about him, or a good portion of that episode in the beginning. He's just trying out different foods to figure out what he likes.
He remembers who he is. He's just trying to figure out, like, as far as history, he's just trying to figure out who he is now as the new Doctor. Yeah.
Actually, David Tennant does the same thing because he's like, am I sassy? Am I, mischievous or whatever?
Yeah. Am I a coward? Am I like?
Yeah, he does that whole speech there.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's a great opening.
I think it's your favorite episode. I think that
it is definitely one of my favorite episodes, and it's because of that speech that he gives right there, where you see him all of a sudden become
talking about who he could be, and as he's talking, he's processing and trying to figure out who he really is.
Yeah, manner of his character. So there's always these kind of jokes in the regeneration sequence of, am I ginger? Am I, do I have good teeth or, whatever? And it's kind of funny to see it. And the joke really throughout almost all of them is he going to be ginger? And he never is, because I think 10 talks about it, 11 talks. And so for our listeners, right? So when we're talking about 10 or 11 or whatever, so there's been 13 Doctors.
I think one of the first questions that the 10th Doctor actually asks Rose, she thinks he's going to ask something like super, super important. And he says, am I ginger?
Yeah.
And she's like, what?
Yeah, it's kind of like a surprise, and which is really funny. I wanted to see here quickly if I could find the list because it was escaping me in my William Hartnell, not William Bradley. William Hartnell was the first one. Yeah, and so actually 13, but now we know that the 14th Doctor is coming. And so when we talk about the 9th Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant as the 10th Doctor, Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor, Peter Capaldi as the 12th, Jodie Whittaker, 13th Doctor, first-time Doctor, was a female. And then Ncuti Gatwa now is going to be the 14th Doctor. And so really just interesting how they can change out these doctors and continue the storyline, which I think is really, really fascinating. So anyway, so the episodes, right, are not just about him bumbling about figuring out who he is, although I guess one could argue that is kind of what they're about.
It's usually the first episode. The first episode of each new Doctor is him trying to figure out who he is and what's going on.
Yeah, but then
after that, then it moves into all the other stuff. And usually he's not traveling by himself, right? So there's always what they call the companions, which can be one person, can be two people. In the past, there's even been up to three or more, folks who have been the Doctor. Actually, in some of the early episodes with William Hartnell, one of the companions was his granddaughter, which was sort of strange because... That's how it began.
And you don't really know too much more about the Doctor's family, but just an interesting thing. So throughout the series, the Doctor has this obsession, this love, this compassion for, of all of the planets, in all of the universe, in all of the galaxies, he tends to focus on Earth, to which we're grateful, but, right, I mean, like, and typically...
Well, of course, Earth, because that's where we are.
That's where we are, so we care about that.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting, I mean, so the Doctor is this guy who travels through time and space, forwards, backwards in time, to the end of the universe, etc. And everybody's British. Suddenly everybody has this British accent.
Or Scottish.
Or Scottish. They should do like somebody's Welsh. They haven't done too much of that, or an Irishman. Have the Doctor be an Irishman once, instead everybody's Scottish or, but that would be kind of fun. But we see throughout the course of this series, the Doctor has these highs, these lows. He's being a hero. He's got victories and defeats, right? And all the while he's trying to save the world, save the universe. And there's lessons that we learn through all of that, right? So
yeah, in the episode that we were talking about earlier, where the 10th Doctor, it's the first episode of the 10th Doctor where he's talking about like who he is, with this whole band of aliens, and the leader of the aliens called him, what did he call him? The Guardian of Earth.
Yeah, something like that.
And I love it when the 10th Doctor says, "Thank you. I have no idea who I am, but you've just summed me up."
Yeah, that's a great line. And that's when, and that's interesting because it's not just that episode, but anybody who's watched the series before knows that even from the 9th Doctor, and anybody who's a long-time Doctor Who fan, like, that is how you sum up the Doctor, And it's interesting because that alien thinks that's a negative thing. Mm-hmm. I'm cursing you, or I am, insulting you, and the Doctor's like, psh, that's the best thing you could have said. Like, I know that's to be true. But yeah, it's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about like the personalities of the Doctors, right? So, and I think we should focus on the 9th. So Christopher Eccleston from the 9th on a little bit, because that's what we're most familiar with. That I feel like if you're going to step into Doctor Who, that's a good place to step in and start watching. You can start watching with the 9th. You could go back and watch the previous Doctors. There's a lot of episodes. Some of them are available, some of them are not.
If you're going to watch Doctor Who, I think you should either start with the 9th Doctor at the beginning of the newer phase of Doctor Who, or you should start with the 11th Doctor. I forget which season it starts. Season 4?
I think it's season 5, actually. 5. So you could start with Matt Smith as the 11th because, well, there was a change in writers too. So
yeah, but as far as like how, or with a new Doctor, the 13th Doctor. Jodie Whittaker. I think those are your 3 starting places. But you would really be doing yourself a disservice to miss the 10th and 11th Doctor. So I really think that you should just start with the 9th or the 11th. Yeah.
Get through the first season there with the 9th Doctor. You'll learn some things. And so So the Ninth Doctor, one of the things I've listed here is, in my notes, the Ninth Doctor, he kind of comes across as angry, maybe bitter. He seems sarcastic.
Should we talk about why? Even though they don't.
They don't really
show why.
We know why.
We know why from watching later.
Yeah. So he comes in. He's got this attitude, but what we learn throughout this is that he's just come out of what's called the Time War, where he essentially had to make this really difficult decision to end the Time War, the war of all wars. And in order to do that,
he had to make a catastrophic decision.
Yeah. Almost like, well, and not just to defeat their enemies, their arch enemies, the Daleks, but in the process of that, he also had to destroy his home planet. And so
he's completely angry, massively depressed, doesn't really want to deal with people, but at the same time still feels compelled to help the people on Earth where he finds a problem.
So there's I'm sure we could spend a whole time on mental health of just the Ninth Doctor, but so he's guilt-ridden, but it was also, we're led to believe through the whole process, through the whole series, that was the only decision that he had to make in order to end the Time War.
It was the only decision he could make.
Yeah. That was the only decision to make. There was no right answer here. The answer to end the Time War is to do what he did.
It was either let the Daleks kill everybody and then take over the universe, or what he did in killing, destroying the Daleks and Gallifrey.
Yeah. So the Ninth Doctor, we're introduced to that. And in that first episode, they really do a nice job, too, of bringing in some of the Doctor Who lore of who he is. And in that series...
And it's good, too, because as he progresses, you can see a glimpse of it in the first episode of... that they have of the show. But as you go through the next few episodes, you realize the new companion, Rose, is actually drawing him out. She is causing him to care again.
Yeah.
Not just feel compelled because he feels like he should help, but actually caring about people again.
Yeah. And something he doesn't really expect, through that whole process. So Ninth Doctor, we've talked about him. Now there's a shift after that first season, and we come into David Tennant, who's the 10th Doctor. He can be intense, but he's also a little more casual. He's the one that comes in with the 3D glasses and the
he's doing things. And
Converse sneakers.
Yeah, he does strange things sometimes, and he doesn't always explain himself until the end when it matters. When he all of a sudden says, "Oh, you recall these glasses? It helps me see these photon particles or whatever they're called."
Yeah.
And this is why it means something.
Yeah, he also sometimes I get a sense he puts on a good show of, I don't know what I'm doing, and he's doing all this kind of stuff, but in the end he's calculating, he's doing things intentionally, and then in the end it's not that he's playing the long game, but he's almost like he's been not distracting, like a diversion, but I'll show you what I'm doing here by coming across all this, but I'm sort of distracting you so I can really do what I want to do, and in the end I got you.
But at the same time, while he's doing all that and figuring it all out, what he kind of alludes to, he alludes to it, he doesn't really explain himself, and they don't really explain it until several seasons later. But he actually is one of the Doctors that, I think because he regressed what happened with his home planet, he gives them chances to make the right decision.
Yeah.
Before he says, okay, now you've gone too far.
Yeah.
He gives them a chance to make it right first.
He does. And, all throughout that, the 10th Doctor also is violence is never the answer. like
he doesn't even carry a gun or anything.
he hates guns.
Yeah.
Almost all the doctors are like anti-guns. He won't even touch a gun. He won't carry one.
He would rather solve the problem with his wits than with a weapon.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I think, to your point about violence is the last resort. So he gives them every opportunity to, some might say, to repent or to, to confess or whatever, and be like, to make this right. And when they don't, then he's like, all right, well, I've got to step in because nobody else is going to. And whether it's to teach a lesson or to whatever. But even in that first episode with David Tennant, right? The Sycorax, the alien race that are there, they're on their way out. He let them go. He defeated their champion. He sent them off. But then when, spoiler alert, when the prime minister then
out of fear, blasts them out of the sky with this new high-tech weapon from what they call torchwood. That the doctor had no idea existed.
Did not know existed. All of a sudden, they're gone. And the doctor's like, that's genocide. And he said
that didn't have to happen.
Yeah. And so even that, where, the human race is showing a sense of fear and trying to protect themselves and demonstrate that they can protect themselves, he's like, well, violence is still not the answer.
Yeah, because he wanted to send the aliens away with a message: don't come to Earth, it's protected.
Yeah.
Whereas the prime minister wanted to send the message of destroying them because she wants to protect the Earth. So they had the same goal. They had two different ways of going about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so the 11th Doctor, he comes in, Matt Smith. He's younger. He's quirky. He's a little bit.
At first, he comes off as kind of like this scatterbrained person, because he's like, he keeps trying to figure out who he is and what he likes. But instead of how David Tennant did it with going through all of the characteristics of who he could be, Matt Smith goes about it in terms of the food that he now likes. How has his taste changed?
Yeah, which is a brilliant bit. He's, beans and bacon and all these things, that...
Yogurt. I like yogurt. Oh, bad yogurt.
Yeah. He even tries like apples, and he's like tossing the apples out and, putting the beans down the drain or whatever. And then, the silly thing is he lands on, fish sticks, or what they call fish fingers, and custard, which sounds... We should use... There's a top 10 worst food episode, and we were talking earlier from our listener feedback. That just sounds disgusting. But, he does the same thing with his clothes in that first episode. So as he's chasing the alien or whatever, and he's going through, I guess it's the hospital or something that's been abandoned, he stops into the locker room and starts pulling clothes out of all these different lockers and
sorting through shirts and jackets and ties.
And so he's really trying to figure out who he is, what his likes are, even in clothing. But what I love at the end of that episode is, again, it comes full circle when he says to the alien race, this large eyeball or whatever, look through the history and find out who I am.
Yeah, because the aliens that he's talking to at the time are like this like prison guard type of race who, like, they guard all the worst prisoners in the universe.
Yeah, yep.
And he says, search through your database. Who has always protected this world?
Yeah.
Has the humans ever done anything that violates your laws?
Right, because they were going to scorch it. They were going to
completely destroy the planet.
It, yeah. And so then they show, and I love when they do this in multiple episodes. They've done this where they show these the faces of all the doctors, which is so cool, and you get to see that history again. Such a strong tie to the history of the show,
and it's sort of like a holographic picture.
Yeah,
and they search through,
and they morph too.
Yeah, the ones of the Doctor morph until all of a sudden it gets the 10th Doctor, And then Matt Smith steps through, like
that's such a great scene.
It is. I get goosebumps.
I love it. And it's like, whoop, here I am. And he's like, hello, I'm the doctor. And it's like, woo!
And he says, basically, run.
Yeah.
Now, I do admit, when I first saw the change, like, because we were, we love the 10th Doctor.
Yeah.
So when we saw this first guy, and he's like this new younger kid, we are like, can he really pull it off? As soon as he said that one word, run, I was like, okay.
I'm sold. I'm in.
He can handle this.
Yep. And he does some brilliant scenes later on, in the series. And in fact, we could talk about some of my favorite episodes, but I love the episode where he and new companion Clara are there on the planet with the grandfather who is like frozen, and there's this giant sun looking kind of ball of fire or whatever, and it absorbs the memories or the energy of your memories of your life or whatever. And he gives a brilliant speech. I used to practice this speech so that I could, whether I was trying to be a voice actor or what, but like that speech is just brilliant. I should do that. I could make a whole playlist of just Steve does voiceover speeches and just practice those and put them up there as strange things. But I love that scene. Okay, so it's
partly the brilliance of Steve Moffat's writing, but it's also Matt Smith's acting. It's like the combination of the two, and it's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine this would be kind of funny, right? If you had somebody who did impressions and take that same speech from like Doctor Who episodes or whatever, and so we know that as Matt Smith who read that one, or who did that one, or David Tennant, but you have like other people read, like, what would that same speech sound as, Angela Lansbury or Rick Moranis or something? Like, what would that be like? That would be nuts. Certainly great writing is great writing, but there's always the performance of the actor that's what sells the audience on it.
And he is great at timing and like giving the dramatic pause before he says like the zinger or like the crux of the speech.
Yeah, absolutely. He just does a brilliant job. I'm watching our time here, so I want to keep us moving a little bit here. But this is one of those things where I could keep talking for hours and hours.
And we have.
In the past. Now we're just recording it all. Okay, so 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi comes in. He comes in like this grumpy, crotchety old man, intense. There is no casual. Super Scottish.
Most Scottish doctor yet.
Yeah, he really is. And he owns it.
Yeah.
He's not shy about it at all. He's sarcastic.
He calls himself an angry Scot.
He does. And I'm Scottish. And so, and he talks, the idea with him is all about his eyebrows. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. Matt Smith was the ears. David Tennant was the hair. Mm-hmm. Peter Capaldi's the eyebrows.
I thought Matt Smith was the chin.
Chinny
boy.
Chinny boy. So it is the chin, but then there's also later on when he actually shaves his head.
Oh yeah,
and like
his ears stick
your
out.
ears are like rocket fins. He's like, I know, and which is hilarious. And so then in that episode, Claire's like, put the wig back on because your ears are sticking out so far. But so Peter Capaldi, very intense. And then the 13th Doctor, Jodie, comes in, and she's so different writer at that point, but comes in totally, almost seemingly clueless and less intentional, I think, in those first. And we haven't watched these time and time again like we have with the others, but I feel like with Jodie, she comes in a little less intentional. She's still working out a plan. She's still working, but it seems all by accident. It doesn't feel quite as
clever and purposeful.
Yeah. And in the end, things work out, but it is different. So Anyway, all right, so let's talk about, before we go to a break here, I want to talk about the first time, our first exposure to Doctor Who, when we watched an episode. And so why don't you, we were at your aunt and uncle's house.
Right. And they said, hey, have you ever watched the show? We think it's brilliant. And we're like, I don't think we even heard of it before.
I don't think we had heard of it at all, no.
And they're like, you have to watch this episode. And we're like, okay, well we try many shows. So we're like, okay, sure.
And clearly there's something about us that they knew us. I mean, they just had this idea like, we think you'll like this show. And so there it is. We watch an episode.
Yeah, it's called Blink. Now, if you watch Doctor Who, which I recommend you do, I do not recommend you watch Blink right before you go to bed if you have an active imagination. Do not do it.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about that is it was at night. We only watched the one episode. But, and the funny thing about that episode, it's like you watch the whole episode and the Doctor is hardly in it.
No, he's not the focus of the episode at all, which is very different than almost every other episode.
Yeah.
It's one of the few where he's not the focus.
See, I think that goes back to brilliant writing. But that episode, Blink, you're introduced to the Weeping Angels. You're introduced to the Doctor, and you have Martha who's in there, which, if you watch the episode beforehand and the episode afterwards in the sequence, this episode sort of really stands out. But it is so well done. I mean, literally, that episode changed my life. I mean,
yeah,
not to sound dramatic, but I mean,
no, but it is that episode is one of the most dramatic episodes in all of Doctor Who, I think.
Yeah. Because
of how it's written, because of the cinematography, because of the timing, because of how it's put together.
The suspense.
Like, that's one of the reasons why, like, when I went to bed, I had a hard time sleeping because I kept closing my eyes and imagining a weeping angel right over my bed.
Yeah.
Like, I could not sleep. It took me hours. Which is why I don't recommend you watch it right before you go to bed.
Yeah, maybe not as your first episode. But the other thing, too, about that episode is that so part of the brilliant storytelling, not just introducing these new characters and these new aliens, but there's also this idea where you get to see the Doctor in action. You understand after that episode, we understood after watching that episode that stuff happens. You have these aliens. Mm-hmm. He comes in to save these people in sometimes unconventional means. Time travel is involved. Mm-hmm. He's always working sort of involved in that. The TARDIS comes into play.
And the time travel part is very important because even though most episodes, you're aware that you're in a different point in space and time than where you just were in the previous episode, unless it's a connected episode, like a two-part.
Right.
But in this episode, they actually play around with the idea of time travel and, like, what happened, like, the Doctor being there, like, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, however long it was, I forget.
Yeah. So from whatever present day is during their time, which is, the mid-90s or whatever it was, or early 2000s, I suppose. Probably early 2000s. But anyway, so during that time, and then they go back to the 60s or whatever, but it's also about how what happens in the past influences the present. And so, kind of reminds me in Back to the Future, at the end of Back to the Future Part 2, Marty is standing on the road in the rain, and the Western Union guy shows up and hands him a letter from 1885, and it's from the Doc. And so Blink has a lot of those kinds of components where the Doctor, through the use of these video clips or whatever.
And there's a video clip on the end of every one of her favorite movies.
Yeah.
And nobody knows, like, there's this whole, like, underground thing, like, what are they for? Who are they for? Like, what are they saying? Because it's, like, a partial it's like a partial conversation, like listening into a partial conversation.
Yeah. And so what's so great about it, you hear clips of that throughout the episode, and then it's not till the end
that you realize all of what it actually is.
And you
for.
get both sides of the conveation, and it is just, that's where I'm like, oh snap. Like it was just so cool. So cool. But overall, I mean, the Doctor, other than that great episode, actually, if you've been watching Doctor Who, I'd love to know, like, in the comments, what our listeners, if they're familiar with Doctor Who, what's their favorite episode? Did they watch Blink at Night? Who's their favorite Doctor? I'd love to know that.
Or who's your favorite baddie?
Who's your favorite baddie? Who's your favorite companion? Mm-hmm. We could do a whole series on just who your favorite wannabe companion is, because I think Sally Sparrow.
She should have been.
She would have been a brilliant companion. She ended up hooking up with what's-his-face.
She chose love instead of the TARDIS.
Yeah, I fell in love with the TARDIS, no. But I think, there's a lot to that we could talk about. But the Doctor, throughout the course of their series, they cover all sorts of events. Pompeii, in the newer series with Jodie, they cover even Rosa Parks, Queen Elizabeth I. Actually, she's in there quite a bit.
Yeah, several times.
And that's a brilliant way they include that in there, too. They allude to all sorts of other events.
Queen Victoria. Just a lot of different parts in history.
Madame Pompadour.
Yeah.
I love that. That's another great episode with the clockworks and the fireplace, the girl in the fireplace.
That was France, 17th century
It was France, yes, but still, monarchs and things like that all throughout history. And another great one is the Van Gogh episode, or Van Gogh, as they say in the UK. But that's another great episode. And digging into his troubled past, his troubled life as Vincent van Gogh.
That was one of the, I think that's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that would be top up there for me too. Yeah. Blink, Van Gogh, Woman in the Fireplace, or whatever. So,
which was Madame de Pompadour.
Madame de Pompadour, yeah. So great episodes. All right, in here's a thought too, that in Doctor Who, throughout the course of things, I mean, they include topics of friendship, love, compassion, inclusion, good versus evil. I would say in a lot of ways, what helps make Doctor Who so successful is that we all want to be the Doctor.
Or a companion with the Doctor.
We want someone who can come in and save the day, who is like us and wrestles with the struggles of decision making in life and things like that, and then come out, victorious, or to come out and stumble his way through, because he doesn't always have it all together.
Or like Clara says, to show us wonders.
Yeah. It's really neat to when they step back and, sometimes they step back and they show you a little bit about what the wonders of the universe, or the wonders of love, or the wonders of beauty in certain things, and like, why do we miss that? And even the Vincent van Gogh episode, that episode is all about this. There's this dichotomy of the alien and Vincent van Gogh that are both troubled, and how they play on that in the storyline in parallel, which is really interesting.
They're both lonely.
Yeah. And what happens, how they deal with that. All right, so why don't we go to break, and we're going to go to break here real quick, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the cultural significance, and then after that, I'm really going to talk about what I will give up my right arm for, because I really don't need my right arm. So
you would rather have this thing, you mean? The thing
than my right arm, yes. Because I could get through life without my right arm. So let's go to break, and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, this is Steve, your host for The Weirdly Random, and I just wanted to take a quick moment to mention our social media platforms, so you can join us and find us online. We're on the Gram, or the Instagram, at The Weirdly Random. We're also on Facebook as The Weirdly Random as well. In addition to our YouTube channel, you can listen to the show now on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, just by searching for The Weirdly Random. And we're hoping to add more podcast options soon. No matter how you listen, we hope to have more people just like you join the Weirdly Random family. Lastly, we're looking forward to launching our own website with other show notes and other things at theweirdlyrandom.com, but more on that soon, we hope. So that's all for now, and we look forward to chatting with you online. Thanks so much. All right, and we are back from break, and so we were talking before the break about Doctor Who, the significance and sort of the personalities of these doctors, and favorite episode. Again, asking our listeners if they're Doctor Who fans, what got them into Doctor Who. But one of the things I want to talk about a little bit here is the cultural significance of Doctor Who. Obviously it's huge in the UK. I mean, I don't know if it was started as a children's show, but it was something that
definitely a family show.
Definitely a family show that a lot of British families, grew up watching. We know people who are from the UK who have watched Doctor Who, from when they were children. So the blue police box obviously has huge significance in UK culture, and as it's come over here to America and to the States, again, it stands out as a cultural icon of British television. But there's other things that show up in children's shows and other things, American TV shows where, you have the Daleks, who are the arch enemy. We were talking about them in the Time War, and the Daleks are an instantly recognizable
shape,
a robot of sorts, an alien or whatever. And then they're instantly recognizable with that voice, that sound, exterminate, and so it, you automatically know what that is. If you're a Doctor Who fan, when you see it, it like warms your soul because you're like, they're referencing, there's another person who knows Doctor Who. And so you see those references and things. It just, it feels good. It feels good. You're like looking at me like, oh, sure it does, I guess. You're crazy.
No, it's like one of those things where it's just like with anything that you love or you're a fan of. Anytime you see a reference to it, you're like, oh, I know you.
Yeah. Things happen like that with Star Wars or with other things. You see these references in. That's when
Back
I guess
to the future with the hoverboard.
Yeah.
With the
DeLorean time machine. I mean. In that way, I guess that's when you know you've arrived, right? When you are referenced in other pop culture kinds of things.
And it's I read a lot. And I can't tell you how many books I've read where the authors reference Doctor Who in some ways, either with the blue police box, the TARDIS, Doctor Who, like something, something related to it. It's definitely permeated the culture.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's great. Now, there's references obviously in British TV shows. I was just watching, not too long ago, I was watching some Mr. Bean episodes. And there's a Christmas episode, and he is in the department store and sort of playing with little things. There's like nativity set, and you have the helicopter that drops in the baby Jesus, and then
right.
He's playing with things and the little sheep, and like, and so then he brings in this toy Dalek, exterminate. And so Mr. Bean is playing with all of this, which is hilarious. So again, TV shows that reference Doctor Who, it has achieved some sort of significance, right, of a cultural icon in pop culture. And there's loads more. I mean, here on the table, our listeners can't really see this, but if we ever post a video, I mean, we've got like Build-A-Bear, Build-A-Bear
the 10th
of
Doctor.
the 10th Doctor. Yeah. Lego Ideas did a Doctor Who set, which we talked about in our first episode of season 1 here. And so there are all these Doctor Who
various TARDISes that we've accumulated.
We have, and I'm sure we have more. But each of these things stand the test of Doctor Who stands sort of the test of time, not just because they're Time Lords, but they stand the test because they have become such a cultural significance. What I too love is how fans have embraced this. So there's so much fan art that is out there. Some brilliant artists who have designed all sorts of things, strictly Doctor Who things. But then there's also these mashups.
Mm-hmm. I love the mashups.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that mash up Doctor Who and the show Sherlock that aired on BBC several years ago.
Yeah. Stephen Moffat also involved with that as well.
Benedict Cumberbatch is in it.
Yeah. And so you have
Martin
those
Freeman.
mashups. You have there's been some fan art of the TARDIS and the DeLorean time machine crashing into it. There was one recently I just saw again, Nightmare Before Christmas, and it's the TARDIS, and you have the Doctor on that iconic view of the Nightmare Before Christmas, and there's like the hill, and Jack Skellington is on the top of the hill, and here they show a TARDIS, so it's kind of like the Nightmare Before the Doctor or something. They do a mashup for that. There's mashups with all sorts of things, which is kind of fun. I have a T-shirt actually has a mashup of the TARDIS and a Transformer. So it's like Tardimus Prime or something. I think that's a new one. I should trademark that. But I just love those, and I follow those on social media. I love seeing those in my feed of these Doctor Who mashups and this fan art, which is just awesome. So we talked about some of the merchandise, some of the merch, as Riley says. We should get merch, but we talk about the merch that's available out there for Doctor Who. I mean, we have the Lego Idea set. We've got there's a Yahtzee game that we have. There is, you really know you've made it when there's a Monopoly game. I think there was a Doctor Who Monopoly game, maybe. Build-A-Bear, all these TARDISes. We have a throw blanket here on the table as a pseudo tablecloth.
You've got like at least one whole shelf of Doctor Who stuff at work.
In my office,
Yeah.
yes, I've got all sorts of stuff. Even the creepiest thing I have regarding Doctor Who merchandise is the mug. The mug that is in the shape of David Tennant's head. That a friend, Jessica, gave it to me, and it's I don't know if it was a white.
I don't think you actually showed that to me.
Really?
No, I don't think you did.
Oh, it is the creepiest thing. You do not want to drink out of it. It's like you're slurping his brain. It is so strange. But it's a mug. It's like from his shoulders up, and it is the strangest looking mug. And but yeah, you could drink out of it, but it's strange. But I have that. I have the bookends that are the TARDIS kind of coming through things. I have the potato heads too.
The
that are
10th Doctor is one of the doctors where it's easy to make merch out of because he's very iconic with the red shoes.
The Converse shoes.
The 3D glasses, and like there's
the look overall.
Yeah, I think only the Matt Smith's the 11th Doctor, the Fez, and what was it, the 4th Doctor with the scarf?
Yep.
I think those are the three that tend to be the most iconic as far as.
Yeah, you have. I mean, the others have iconic and strange things about them, but they don't stand out quite like those guys do. You know, you have the fifth Doctor who had celery on his jacket. I mean, what's that all about? Then you have...
I think the banana was better. Always take a banana to a party.
Well, that was the 10th Doctor, too. He said that. Then you have the, which would have been the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy. He had the jacket or whatever with the question marks all over it. And he carried the umbrella with the hook on it. It was actually a question mark. And the strange thing is, then during that time, they really leaned hard into the question mark of Doctor Who, as in like, this is a question, not just a statement of a name. Yeah, which was very, very interesting.
And they do play up on that question during Matt Smith's tenure time.
Absolutely.
As the Doctor.
It becomes a theme throughout the end of his time there of really who is the Doctor. Not just Doctor Who, like we don't know his real name, but who is this man who is the Doctor, and what is the nature of his character, and
what does it mean to ask the question?
What does it mean to ask the question, Doctor Who? Yeah, that's a brilliant... Those Christmas episodes there as they come into the end of his time are just brilliant. It's actually like a mini... It's like a mini series. I'll watch those in order, including with the 50th anniversary episode, which I thought was amazing.
I think that it's definitely one of my top 5. It might be my top 2. It could even be my number 1.
Really, the 50th?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great.
I just love the interplay between the 3 Doctors that they have there. The 10th, 11th Doctors, and then the War Doctor. The War Doctor,
yeah. Yeah, that was, which we didn't mention because he doesn't have a number, right? So the War Doctor is actually played...
And he comes in only in the 50th anniversary, so he's kind of out of order.
Yeah. William Hurt.
Yeah.
That's his name, right? Man, I am dropping names tonight. I cannot remember these names at all.
I think Hurt is definitely the last name.
Yeah, that sounds really close. John Hurt.
John Hurt, yes.
John Hurt. See, the interwebs are amazing to remember things. But anyway, so that's the Doctors. That's how they played into that, the cultural significance of that. But what I love so much, I think what I get excited about, so something that I think about if I'm having trouble sleeping, is sometimes I'll sit there, I'll lay in bed, and I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm trying to figure out, like, so I'm not worried about work or stress of life or whatever. I will think about, what would it be like if I had a TARDIS?
This is what you think about when you're stressed out, or?
When I'm trying to fall asleep and I want to just let my mind drift into like imaginative wonder, weird land, things that are not possible, but it'd be so fun if it was possible, you know?
Letting your imagination go.
Let my imagination go is the TARDIS. It is the one vehicle, I guess, if you can call it that I wish I had. Sure. Would I love to have a DeLorean time machine? Yes.
But that can only go in time, not in space.
You still need gas, or, of course, if you have Mr. Fusion, you can put trash in it.
It's only a car, whereas with a TARDIS, it's like this whole...
And you have no trunk space in a DeLorean. There's very little, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the TARDIS, I mean... You know, I made a note here of other iconic vehicles. You have KITT Knight Rider. Right. Well, that car doesn't do anything. It shoots...
Well, it talks.
Smoke. It talks, right. So it has an artificial intelligence to it, but big deal. Now, I've thought about, you know, if we're really using our imaginations here, like the Millennium Falcon. Well, that would be cool, but let's face it, we just don't have the parking. You know,
well, maybe we could fit it. We do have a parking lot.
We do have parking here, but you know, that is just, you know, that occurred to me. I get off on these tangents, but like, Where do they refuel? You've never seen a Star Wars vehicle, Star Wars spaceship refueling.
Well, they would have to refuel before they went out.
I guess it's nuclear or something. It just does it. Anyway, side tangent. But the TARDIS...
That's how they get away with having the science without explaining the science. It just happens.
It just happens.
It exists.
That's true.
You know it works. Yeah. They don't explain
Every
why
vehicle
or
uses
how.
fuel somehow, so just assume that it happens, but don't think too hard about it. But when it comes to the TARDIS, though...
That's what one of my friends called hand-wavium. They wave their
hand-wavium?
Yeah, they wave their imagination hand over it and just say, it just happens.
That's
it
just how
works
it works.
that way.
Trust me, I wave my hand. Interesting. I like that. Hand-wavium. But with the TARDIS, I'm in. If the TARDIS was a real thing in the way that it's described in Doctor Who, I'm totally on board. I would love to have one. Not as in just a plain old police phone box that I can lock myself in and it's roughly the size of a closet. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about legit, bigger on the inside, Time Lord science. It folds space to fit into the blue box, and it can expand indefinitely or infinitely as it draws on time vortex energy. So hashtag nerd alert here. I mean, that's how it works. So the fact that you can fit room upon room upon room, tens of rooms upon tens of rooms. And
it doesn't just change. Like, it stores every
iteration.
Every iteration of the TARDIS, every room, every control room that it's ever had.
Right.
It doesn't erase it or change it to become something new. It stores the whole complete room into its storage and then moves the new one into being.
Yeah, which is just fascinating. I love that. Now, that's a little more nerdy than where I was going, but...
well, that's something that I like about it.
Well, I do love that. I mean, there is the historical...
There's so much space. It doesn't go anywhere, and you can have anything. You can have a library. You can have a pool in the library.
Which actually happens, right? But imagine, this whole idea. So it stores a room and how that room was arranged. So imagine if you could do that in your house. Like, remember how we had the house like 10 years ago? I think we should do that again. Click. And you pull it up in the library, the Rolodex of rooms. Maybe our listeners don't even know what a Rolodex is. If you know what a Rolodex is, good on you. You are not a millennial. And if you are a millennial, that's good. But look up a Rolodex.
Pre-cell phone age.
Pre-cell phone age, right. That you could just recall the look of that room, or not just the look of that room, but the whole room itself, and rematerialize that room. That's cool. But imagine, so as I'm laying in bed trying to think about this and trying to drift off to sleep without stress of work and other things, I think about, imagine if I had like the largest castle I could find. There's like that iconic castle that's on like jigsaw puzzles and things. So you have this huge castle.
I think it's in Germany.
Or Switzerland, right?
Austria, something like that.
Yeah. So this giant thing, or a mansion, or even an entire private island, right? And imagine that you could travel with that castle anywhere you wanted, and it fits in a parking space.
Less than a parking space.
Less than a parking space, right? You could go anywhere in the world with all of your stuff, and
including your bed, which is really, let's be honest, that's the most important thing here.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. You never have to pack again. Never pack a suitcase. You never have to stay in a hotel. You never have to, worry about where you're gonna, how you're gonna get there, how long it's gonna take, whatever. I don't even need it to travel in time. I really just want it to just materialize from one place to the next.
So you can just go wherever you want, whenever you want, and take whatever you want to take with you at any point in time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. One, there's no more standing in traffic. There's no more packing all this stuff, staying in hotels that you hate, worrying whether or not I'm going to get back into my bed or not, or, you're just traveling with your home. You just park it outside on the lawn. Or park it, if you're going to a friend's house, park it on their grass. Park it in the street, I guess, if you want to. But
empty corner of your house.
In the basement, someplace, right? But really, you just need, this space. And I think that, actually, I looked this up. The dimensions of the TARDIS are roughly 5 feet by 5 feet. So,
well, that's really not that much space at all.
It isn't. Now, height-wise, it goes to about 10 feet or so.
No, well, we don't have enough space for that here in the house.
Maybe you could have it if the chameleon circuit wasn't stuck, you could transform it into a bookshelf or something, right? But you could fit it still somewhat in. They have it appear in houses in some of the episodes.
Which is why I find 10 feet tall
Maybe it's 8 feet. Maybe it's 8 feet. But anyway, there's no more crappy hotels, no more uncomfortable trips, no more wondering if you're going to wake up with bed bugs, no more traveling to some place. Or
it takes the stress out of travel. So all that you have left is the enjoyment of where you're going.
It does. Or, you travel and you're going to go visit family and you realize, you're you don't know where you're going to end up, right? You could be on the floor, you could be on an air mattress, you could be sleeping in your spouse's childhood bed, at their house, and that's a little strange. That's 2 feet too short. That's weird.
Most beds are 2 feet too short for you.
That's true. That is true. But now it doesn't matter, right? Because I have a TARDIS and I can travel with it.
So I'm guessing with how much you're going on and on about how much you love it, that this is the thing that you would give your right arm.
1,000%. Take my arm now. I would love it. I mean, think about this. Everything. So everything that's in the house, everything that we own, you have. I could have a whole room just devoted to all of my TARDIS miniatures, all my Legos, all sorts of stuff.
You could have separate rooms. One for the TARDIS and then one for the Legos.
Exactly. I could have 3 rooms just for Legos. I could put all my, Legos of one type in one room. All my Legos of another type in another room. That would be amazing. But there's no more traffic. Traveling with kids, done. Kids, shut the door. We're going to show up in 30 seconds in California right now. It's going to happen. We're just going to travel. It's going to make that sound. You get used to the sound.
Oh, you want to go to Disney World? Sure, we'll go to Disney World for a night.
Yeah, we'll show up underneath Epcot, and be like, open the door. The only thing is you still probably have to, we could materialize inside Disney World, but
ethically, we would still have to pay.
We would still have to pay.
But we wouldn't have to pay for the travel or the hotel to stay in, just the daily tickets.
We park right outside the gate. Find out wherever that Disney property line is and boom, park right on the outside and just walk in. Or take a parking space. We could just park it in a parking space. But I just love that, The other thing, too, is like no more traffic. No more sitting in traffic wondering when your next rest stop is going to be because you drank 64 ounces of Dr. Pepper or something. Like, that's all gone. You don't have to worry about that. Just vanish from one spot and appear in the other. So, again, not time travel, just space travel within the space, the 3-dimensional space of our world. So I don't need to travel through time. That gets too messy. I just want to travel from one location to another instantaneous.
With all your stuff.
Inside the TARDIS with all my stuff. Yes. It's a great thing. It is amazing. I mean, no more worrying about cars, no more worrying about, uncomfortable beds, none of that. It's all gone. You want to go to Tahiti? We can go to Tahiti tomorrow. And you know what? And we can be back. We can go spend the day there and then be back for dinner. Because, again, we're not traveling through time. We're just...
Yep.
And you disappear and show up. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It is. But not just the mechanic of it, but also the lore of how in Doctor Who itself. That's what I like about it.
Sure. I mean, and they play on that idea of these ever-expanding rooms. It can be a maze.
But the TARDIS becomes an actual character, not just a tool.
Sure.
In the show.
I don't need it to be a character in my life.
I know.
I have enough characters in my life. I want it as a practical mode of transportation. That's what I want. I don't think that's too unreasonable. Asking for a fictional creation in a non-fiction world. Yes.
Okay, if the TARDIS came with also like a Star Wars type of scanner health fix up, I forget what
Star Trek, not Star Wars. Star Trek.
True.
Let's get our fandoms right here. Trek. They're gonna tear us apart here.
Something like that, where like you're healed pretty quickly. If it came, both of them came together, that would be my thing.
What was the one Star Trek movie was like Star Trek 3 or something? I think it's the one with the dolphins, maybe. Mm-hmm. But they show up, or the whales, and what's his name? The doctor.
McCoy.
McCoy, right? So they're walking through the hospital, and he's like, "You barbarians!" Like talking about all the medical technology. And he's like, "Here, take a pen and take a pill." And all of a sudden, she's got a new kidney or something, and she's like, "I've been healed," because he's like, "Give her a pill." And this medicine or whatever just all of a sudden just heals her body. But those coders, those scanners, that would be cool.
Yes. Obviously, because I have health issues. I like the health technology.
I have hypochondria. So that would work really well for, no, you don't have COVID. No, you just need to drink water. Oh, okay. Well, that's helpful to know, little medical tricorder. Thank you. But let's scan again. Nope, you still need to drink water, But so they talk about this thing. So coming back to the TARDIS, what I love about this is, you can have a pool, you can have all this kind of stuff. They say life is all about the journey. Well, recently, my journey in my vehicle involves hours in sometimes an uncomfortable car, particularly parked on the highway during the summer months, without air conditioning, in the dead of summer.
So that's why you keep talking about avoiding the highway traffic.
Yes. As I die slowly of dehydration in my car, the journey should not be equal to rotisserie chicken, because that's what happens to me sitting in my car without air conditioning in the summertime. It's awful. So I do keep coming back to that because that is my recent experience. But I also don't like camping either. But here you get the best of both worlds. We could go camping and still make s'mores and things like that, but take the TARDIS. So no more bugs, no more rain, no more bears or axe murderers in the woods. You just show up with your TARDIS, make your campfire, make your s'mores, roast your weenies, and then head inside, shut the door. Sure, you can sleep under the stars inside the TARDIS. That'd be fine.
Inside the TARDIS.
Inside the TARDIS. I'm sure there's a room that we can invent inside the TARDIS that has stars on the ceiling. So I don't need to go and get bitten alive by fire ants while I'm sleeping. Why? Why would I do that? But all of those things could be super, super cool. But yes, that is what I would give my right arm for. I mean, I'm left-handed, so my right arm really doesn't get a lot of use. Modern technology, I could always get, a robot hand, I'm sure. The potential problem is if, I suppose if you need two hands to navigate the TARDIS, I would really need a robot hand if I'm only left-handed, right? So,
well, since it's technically supposed to take like 10 people to accurately fly it, you would need more than one hand. So
maybe I shouldn't give up my right arm, but maybe I should give up like my right leg or something, because then I could still use my hands to try to fly it, but I don't know. You get the point. I would travel all around the world with a TARDIS, and that would be incredible. That would be awesome. Imagine we go to Australia, we go to Europe, anywhere we haven't gone, we could go. And so I love thinking about that. It is just so, I've actually sometimes thought about, what if I wrote like a short story about Steve's adventures in the TARDIS? Like, if within the context of Doctor Who, the doctor, obviously fictional, says, Steve, I'll lend you my TARDIS for a day. What would I do for a day with the TARDIS? I mean, that would be awesome. I'd go all over, but, or any place that, I'd probably have a few guidelines or guide rules as far as.
If we talk time and space, you could go anywhere for your whole life and come back at the end of the day.
And then still have the rest of my life to go through because I traveled through time. Yes. So you spend 80 years traveling and you come back. You still have another 80 years. Like, I guess, I don't know, be interesting. I suppose one could really create a time paradox and I could go and travel all the world and then die on the same day that I was born.
You could.
Because I could time travel.
You could.
So I would just have one date on my tombstone.
Yes, that would be a little weird.
It would save space. Maybe even characters. I could put a witty little quip on my tombstone because I saved the characters. Like my tombstone is like Twitter or something, like you only have 120 characters on your tombstone or something. Well, I time traveled and died on the day I was born, so I have more characters for a funny little quote. Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably not. Let's not do that. So anyway, so I'd love to know, like, from our listeners, like where they would travel to if they had a TARDIS. What rooms maybe would they have? Would they have a knitting room or a crochet room or?
Yeah, mine would be the library for sure.
Yeah, the library.
Like the biggest library ever.
I probably would have one only because I felt like I should have one, but like a home gym or something, like. Because I should have one, not necessarily that I want one or would use it, but I should have one.
I would also want an art room.
Ooh, an art room.
Yes.
A room that has art in it?
Artsy, craftsy stuff.
So both. Not a room that just has art, but a room where you
both
create art.
Both.
I'd put a coffee room in
What, any kind of coffee from anywhere in the world or something?
Oh, that would be amazing. Yeah, I want to try some Arabian coffee. I want to try some coffee from Thailand or coffee from East Jabip. Not sure where that is.
Or if it even exists.
I've heard that term before. I know it exists somewhere, even if in my own imagination. So anyway, I think this would be super, super cool. I'd love to see like where our listeners would go, what kind of rooms they would have. I'd love to know about their, like, you can let us know in the comments. Where would you travel to? What about your TARDIS adventures? What is something in your imagination if the TARDIS was real? Maybe if you're not a Doctor Who fan, but you love Doctor Who, you love this idea of a TARDIS as a instantaneous
mode of
travel
transportation
device. Yes, mode of transportation. Take all of your stuff with you all the time, and you just show up wherever you want. Again, we're not talking about travel in time. We're just talking about within the plane of space where you could travel to. We could eventually talk about, the dimensions and beyond the third dimension, getting into fourth dimension and fifth dimension, but that's all fascinating stuff. Extremely dangerous, though, because you could potentially run into your future self, and the consequences of that could be disastrous.
Well, now you're talking Back to the Future.
I am. In fact, that's almost a direct quote from the doc from Back to the Future. But anyway, I could easily talk for Doctor Who for hours and hours. We have talked for a while, but we got to wrap this up. We will cover future episodes and favorite episodes, favorite aliens. We could do a whole episode on, or at least a portion of an episode on just the sonic screwdriver,
and all its iterations.
All its iterations and functionalities. We already talked about best companions, worst companions we could even do. But I think that's it for this one. More on Doctor Who.
An episode on each of the Doctors.
We could do that too. We could review episodes. We could review Blink and do a live, almost like Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they watch it and make ridiculous comments. That'd be kind of silly. But more on Doctor Who in the future or in the past. Which is it? But anyway, before we head out, just want to take a quick reminder that if you like today's episode, please be sure to please click that like button. That helps us know that.
Or subscribe.
And
subscribe.
You can subscribe too, and you'll be notified when we produce other content, other weirdly random content. We're actually now on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so if that is your mode of listening, you can do that too, and subscribe there as well. If you're on iTunes or on Apple Podcasts, what's really helpful for us too is if you leave a review. If people leave a review, it shows up in suggested content and helps in the algorithms of Apple to show our show, and other people can find it based on similar interests and things like that. So that's really handy. But you can subscribe there on your phone. Helps more people find us and to join the Weirdly Random family as we seek to continue to be weird and random. On socials, you can follow us on Instagram at The Weirdly Random and tag us with your random weirdness, perhaps, or you can use the hashtag The Weirdly Random as well. We're on Facebook. You can search for us as The Weirdly Random, and we'd love to see your random adventures in time and space and in your own world of weirdness. It's okay to be weird.
Weird and random.
Weird and random. That is me. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening on The Weirdly Random. My name is Steve. You are
Sarah.
And we'll see you next time. And remember, Riley and I, we figured this out in our first episode. We have this tagline that we say. So remember to stay weird, be random, and never fail to be kind. I like it. It's good. It's a good one.
It is.
All right. Adios.